In late 2024, the world watched as a 50-year-old regime in Syria collapsed in a matter of days. The government of Bashar al-Assad was gone. In the chaos, a decades-old frozen conflict on a rugged plateau, the Golan Heights, was suddenly shattered. This is a place where, for over half a century, the fates of two nations have been written by tanks, treaties, and the control of one vital resource: water. This small strip of land, captured by Israel in 1967, is a critical water source, feeding the Sea of Galilee and providing a vital portion of Israel's water. With the fall of Assad, a new, unpredictable chapter began. Israeli forces, for the first time in 50 years, moved across the old ceasefire line, entering the unpatrolled buffer zone. They called it a temporary defensive measure. In this part of the world, temporary measures often become permanent. But just when it seemed a new, hardened front line was being drawn, the story took another unexpected turn. To understand what's happening now, and what it could mean for the future, you have to understand how we got here. To really get what's happening, we can't start in 1967. We have to go back to the end of World War I. The Ottoman Empire had collapsed, and European powers were carving up the Middle East. A 1923 agreement between the British and French drew the border between British Mandatory Palestine and the French Mandate for Syria. And that line? It put the strategic plateau of the Golan Heights squarely inside Syria. When Syria became independent in 1946, the Heights were a sovereign part of the new country. After the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Syria understood just how valuable this high ground was. From up there, its artillery had a commanding view over Israeli communities down in the Hula Valley and along the Sea of Galilee. For the next 20 years, Syria fortified the Heights, turning it into a massive military stronghold. For Israelis living in the shadow of the Golan, life was defined by constant tension. A 1949 armistice agreement was supposed to create a demilitarized zone, but it was violated all the time. Syrian positions on the Heights were used to shell Israeli farms and villages, sparking frequent and bloody clashes at the border. For Israel, this wasn't just a nuisance. It was an existential threat hanging right over its northern population centers, and its most critical water source, the Sea of Galilee. That threat would finally come to a head in the summer of '67. As tensions across the region exploded into the Six-Day War in June 1967, Syria launched a preemptive offensive. Citing the need to end the constant threat, Israeli forces stormed the heavily fortified Syrian positions on the Golan. In a stunning and rapid military operation that took about 30 hours, they captured the vast majority of the strategic plateau. The human cost was immediate and steep. Somewhere between 100,000 and 145,000 Syrian Arabs, whose families had lived on the plateau for generations, either fled the fighting or were expelled. Only a handful of Druze villages mostly remained. Israel quickly started building Jewish settlements on the depopulated land. In the aftermath, the United Nations Security Council passed its landmark Resolution 242, which called for the withdrawal of Israeli forces from territories occupied in the war in exchange for peace. But peace wasn't on the horizon. 6 years later, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in Judaism, Syria and Egypt launched a surprise attack to reclaim their lost land. In the Golan, Syrian tanks poured over the ceasefire line, determined to recapture the Heights. What came next was one of the largest and most brutal tank battles in modern history. After making initial gains, a desperate and bloody Israeli counterattack managed to push the Syrian forces back. The war ended in another Syrian defeat. In 1974, the two sides signed a disengagement agreement. Israel gave back a small sliver of territory, including the destroyed city of Quneitra, but held on to most of the Heights. A key part of this deal was creating a demilitarized buffer zone, patrolled by a United Nations Observer Force, UNDOF, which has monitored the fragile ceasefire ever since. For 50 years, that line held. Then, in 1981, Israel made a move that changed the game. The Knesset, Israel's parliament, passed the Golan Heights Law, which applied Israeli civil law and administration to the area. While it wasn't a formal declaration of sovereignty, the international community widely saw it as a de facto annexation. The world's reaction was swift. Unsecurity Council Resolution 497 declared Israel's decision null and void, and without international legal effect. For decades, this has been the unwavering international consensus. The one major exception came in 2019, when the United States, under the Trump administration, officially recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, a move no other country has followed. But this isn't just a story about armies and resolutions. It's about the people who actually live there. Today, the population of the Israeli-occupied Golan is roughly 50,000, and it's split almost evenly. About half are Israeli settlers living in communities built after 1960. The other half are the approximately 25,000 Druze residents of the villages that remained after the war. The majority of this Druze community has consistently refused offers of Israeli citizenship, holding on to their Syrian identity and passports. For them, the fall of the Assad regime has brought a confusing mix of hope for a democratic Syria and fear of being permanently cut off from their homeland. The Syrian civil war, which started back in 2011, had already thrown a wrench in everything. It put peace talks on ice indefinitely and turned the Syrian side of the border into a chaotic mess of government troops, rebel groups, and jihadist factions. By 2018, Bashar al-Assad's forces, with Russian and Iranian backing, had retaken control of the area. Then came December 2024, a lightning fast offensive. A coalition of Syrian rebel forces swept across the country. The Assad dynasty, which had ruled Syria for over half a century, crumbled. As Syrian army soldiers abandoned their posts along the Golan border, a massive power vacuum opened up. Israel's reaction was immediate, citing the collapse of the 1974 agreement and the need to stop hostile forces from filling the void. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the military to cross the ceasefire line and seize control of the UN buffer zone. It was the first time Israeli soldiers had entered the zone since 1974. The move was swiftly condemned by the UN and Arab nations as a violation of the accord. And that brings us to today, in a new and profoundly uncertain reality. The fall of Assad removed a predictable long-time enemy from Israel's border, but replaced it with unpredictability. For a moment, it looked like a new, permanent occupation of the buffer zone was underway. But then, something no one expected happened. Direct talks. Under pressure from the US, Israeli and new Syrian officials began direct security negotiations. The Syrian foreign minister has been clear. These talks are not about the Golan Heights itself, which they consider a separate issue, but specifically about an Israeli withdrawal from the buffer zone areas it entered after Assad's fall. Intelligence sharing mechanism has even been set up. The old playbook has been thrown out. The 1974 agreement isn't just in tatters. It's being actively redefined. Israel's leaders still state that Golan will remain in their hands. But the new Syrian government insists that any security deal must respect its sovereignty and lead to a withdrawal from recently occupied areas. The question now is whether the collapse of an old tyranny will, against all odds, pave the way for a new kind of security pact, or simply unleash a new, more chaotic era of conflict for the Golan Heights. If you found this explanation of the Golan Heights helpful, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into complex world events. And let us know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think the future holds for this contested region? Thanks for watching.